Hey folks, I see folks are trickling in. We're gonna go ahead and wait a couple more minutes so that more folks can join. Welcome to week 2. Good morning, everyone. So while we wait, you folks can go ahead and type in questions if you have any. I know folks have been emailing me about the Blackboard. I'm gonna make an announcement at the beginning to kind of address those questions. But if folks have any other pressing questions, you can write them on the chat. Morning, folks. We're gonna go ahead and wait until 11, and then I'll go ahead and get started. I hope your weekend was good. I hope folks got the chance to rest a little bit. I know last week was the first week of school, so I hope that was good for everyone. I know it could be stressful, but you can always take a moment, take a deep breath, and tell yourself, assure yourself that everything's gonna work out. Everything's gonna be okay. Morning. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. I know more folks will probably join. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So let's go over the Blackboard stuff. So I know some folks have been confused about the modules, and yes, it's confusing. So yesterday I went ahead and deleted the modules. So I'll show you. I'm going to share my screen so that you folks can see. So this is our Blackboard, right? On the left-hand side, I think you folks had module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4, right? I went ahead and deleted that on my end, so it shouldn't appear anymore. We're not going to be using those modules. We're going to be using mostly, so on the left-hand side here, it says welcome, it has your syllabus, it says about your professor, announcements, and then under course materials here on this like second square, you'll see course materials and then course materials here. So you're going to go ahead and click on that. I think it's like, I don't know why it's not going. That's weird. There we go. So under course materials here, you'll find that all of our content. So you'll find our syllabus here, and then week by week, we will have a folder. So this was the folder for last week, for week 1. Now we're gonna be in week 2. So you'll get to see the slideshow, you'll have the reading, and then you have access to the quiz here, right? So everything you need should be under the course materials tab. And then another tab that is important for our class is the announcements. So here, and then you all should be getting an email every time I make an announcement. But under this tab, you can see week to week the announcements that I make, right? So we're gonna have a quiz, or I sent the link for the YouTube Live. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, great question, Eliana. So Eliana says, do we have any additional assignments besides the quizzes? So it's week by week. It's going to be the quiz, the reading, the lecture, and the quiz. So that's all you have to worry about. So yeah, don't worry about, I think some of the assignments are past due. They should have, yeah. So I'll go ahead. Where does the weekly assignments show up, Jeffrey? So for the class, it's the lecture, the reading, and the quiz. That's what you have to worry about or work on week by week. I might have like a couple of discussion boards or something like an exercise where you have to observe or draw, but I haven't announced those yet. So for now, you're focusing on the lecture, the reading, and then the quiz. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with, oh, I see. Okay. I see what you mean. So under materials, under week 2. Okay, so I see what you mean. This is from last time I taught art appreciation. So just if you see this assignment chapter 2 or assignment, just ignore it. It's gonna be lecture, reading, quiz, lecture, reading, quiz. So just go like that every week, okay? Michelle asks, are we allowed to get ahead of our work? So I would say the pacing of the class is pretty good. It's a good pacing, so I would try to stay really close to the pacing of the class. It's like I want folks to take in the material, be able to reflect. I don't want folks to just be like, okay, read, answer, right? That's why the lectures are so important, right? Because the outcome for this class is, I really don't prioritize you kind of memorizing things. I want to prioritize you being exposed to different works of art and being able to observe and reflect on the meaning and on the context of artwork. And the goal ultimately at the end of the class is that you have a more appreciation, right? A broader kind of view of art. So please try to engage with the work, with the class. To answer your question, Michelle, you can get ahead, but I wouldn't rush. I would just stay close to the pacing of the class. Yeah. So Jennifer, yes, the folder for week 2 does have an assignment. Ignore that assignment. Yes, readings, lectures, and quizzes are all we focus on. Cecilia, you can take the quiz more than once, but you can only take it again if you get below like a 70. Okay, sounds good. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm going to go ahead and start with my lecture. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, awesome. So welcome to week 2. So this week we're gonna talk about the language of art and architecture. So a lot of I kind of want to give an introduction at the beginning of this course, and then we can get more in detail analyzing different works. But this class in particular, this lecture in particular, is kind of showing you kind of an overview of how to observe art and how to observe and kind of zoom in, right? When we see a work of art, there's a lot of elements, might be a lot happening, but in this particular section of the course, in this class, I want us to start kind of dissecting, right? And zooming in and noticing all the elements and qualities of a piece of work. So it's kind of like blocks, right? We have this like, we're kind of starting with this building, but then we're like pulling it apart to see all the different things that make up that structure. So I always like I like to start with the timeline. I think it's kind of cool to start even with just like the timeline of like the existence of planet Earth and the solar system. Just to put everything in context, so you can see on the second one where humans started evolving. That's 600,000 years. That in comparison to 300 million plus, like with the Big Bang, right? So it's like the existence of the solar system, then the planets, right? And then like humans evolved like around 600,000 years ago. So then seeing the dinosaurs also 65 million years ago, even the earliest life forms 3.8 billion years ago. And then the birth of the sun, which is very important to life on Earth, 5 billion years ago. So you can kind of see time, right? And then, so your book will have a lot of dates. And it's the date followed by BCE or CE. And I just wanted to translate that. So BCE is before Common Era. So before, there's kind of like this, the time frame, and then there's a zero in the middle, right? Anything that happened before the zero is before Common Era. And then here it starts, like, for example, we're in year 2021. And so here it starts from 1, 2, 3, 4, right, all the way to 2021. So when you see a date that says BCE, this is 6,000 years before Common Era. So yeah, does that make sense? So then what we know from ancient about kind of dates, how we're talking about dates on the book also is that ancient history is from 6,000 BCE to 650 CE, which is Common Era. And then we have movements like time periods like post-classical, modern, and contemporary. So some of the elements and principles when looking at a piece of work. And this is part of the dissecting it, right? So we can look at line. We look at light and value. We look at color, texture, pattern. We look at the shape. We notice if it has volume, there's space inside of the shape. When we're looking at performance, or we're looking at a recording or an audio or a video, we're looking at time, at motion. Again, when we're looking at a performance or an installation, we look at chance, improvisation, and spontaneity. And then some of the principles that an artwork has is we also look for balance, right? Some of the ways that artists make work is that they follow these principles, right? Does my work have balance? And if it doesn't have balance, is there a purpose behind that? You know what I mean? So another principles are rhythm, proportion, scale, emphasis, unity, and variety. So I'll be explaining these in more detail. So we first start with line, right? So we have different kinds of lines. We have straight lines, regular lines. We have implied lines that are kind of broken up, right? They're not complete, they're kind of broken up. We have different we draw lines in different directions. So they can be vertical, they can be horizontal, they can also be diagonal. We can draw very flowy lines, kind of meandering lines. We can use traditional like calligraphy pens to draw more calligraphic lines. We can draw shaky lines or jagged lines. So the lines also have this kind of character and personality, right? Because of the kind of gestures that the hand makes. So it can feel very airy, very light, or it can feel like very chaotic, or it could feel shaky. So then here we also have examples of different kind of types of lines and drawings. So we can say something is gestural when the idea is there, like we use line to kind of form the idea. Maybe there is very simple lines and very simple, we're starting to form kind of the silhouette. That's very gestural, right? When we have kind of the silhouette of something, it's like an outline. Also look at this hatching and cross hatching. Hatching is used in printmaking, and it's also used in drawing. And see the distance between the lines and then the amount of lines also determine value. So value means if something is from a scale of light to dark, right? So you can think of a scale where there's white, gray, dark gray, black, right? So you can start to see that hatching and cross hatching creates these different values. So we'll look at this example from the book. This piece is from 1849. It's a print. And we can see all the different types of lines right here. There's thick lines, there's very like thin, fine, crisp lines. There's a lot of lines together, right? So we can see all the different kind of line qualities that make up this piece. Also to mention like an art principle, there's some movement here. So you notice that the sword is kind of diagonal, the head is kind of tilted, the body leans towards the left. So that implies kind of some sort of movement, right? And then we can see the thicker lines are the lines that describe what he's wearing, contrasted with the crisp lines of the sword here. And then we see how the hair, right? The lines of the hair also they're fine, and there's a lot of them, and they're overlapped. So then we look at cross-hatching, right? This is a print. So we can also see that cross-hatching can create light areas and very dark areas. So the more kind of lines we have maybe close in proximity, and the amount can make something look darker. So here we have value scales. So the first one is black to white. So you can see the variety of values here, but they can also be different values in color, right? And if you observe the circle here, you can also see value. That value creates shape, it creates volume. So actually imagine that there's a circle and it's just a silhouette, an outline of a circle, compared to this, where the artist is already adding kind of different values to that shape, creating dimension and creating space. So when a color is mixed with black, we call this shades. And then when it's more towards the light side mixed with white, we call them tints. And then we can see an example on the right with this painting from 1947. We see kind of this monochromatic painting. There are shades and there are tints of color. And you can see that this choice of color in particular describes the mood of the painting and the mood of the person, right? We see this back view of this person. We only see their hair and their back. Their back is very pale, looks brown. So it's already, you can see how color is used to create mood in this piece. And then another example of value is, this is another artist, printmaker, Leopoldo Mendez, and it's a woodcut. So you can see the very, very dark areas, right? Right here in between the soldiers, all the shadows, and then you can start to see the light, also the mid kind of tones here, and then the very, very light areas with the fire. So we see a great amount of values here. And you can see how value is used to create this effect, right, in this piece. So there's also something called chiaroscuro, which is traditionally a form, a style of painting that uses very, very, very dark and very, very, very light. So it's like a contrast of dark and light. And so this is an example of the artist Caravaggio. This is an oil painting from 1598. And so you can see that it's a dark room, right? It's a really dark room. And then there's one source of light on the right. And that light, very light source is illuminating all the faces of the figures. So that's called chiaroscuro. And then the properties of color. So when we refer to color, we can say, oh, that's a hue, which means it's just a color in the spectrum. When we say value, we describe the color, right? Is it a light? Is it a light hue or a dark hue? Again, when black is added to a value, it's a shade. So if you see something darker, perhaps mixed with black, you would say shade. When white is added, you would say tint. And then the intensity is the brightness or just the subduedness of a hue. So for example, we have neutral tones. So this would be like a neutral color palette. And then we have saturated high intensity tones, which is like very bright colors. So the neutral tones would be like more like low intensity. They're not saturated, they're not bright, they're not intense. They're neutral. And then the saturated ones are like the high intensity colors. And then we have the color in terms of pigment, which pigment comes from the earth. Oftentimes, pigment also comes from like artificial kind of chemically made color. But when we refer to additive color system, we refer to light, because there's color in light, right? And so when these three kind of basic primary light colors are put together, then we get this white light, which is usually seen in like theaters and performance. And then the subtractive is more talking about paint and pigment. So when we're putting together the primary colors for pigment, which is yellow, red, and blue, we get kind of a dark kind of black here. So to explain this further, and to see also like just the wonderful connections between science and art, right? When scientist Isaac Newton did this experiment, and you probably all learned about it in school or have heard about it in 1666, where he showed a white light through a prism, and it created all these kind of rainbow colors, right? So this experiment demonstrated that all these colors already existed in light, which is amazing. It's pretty cool. So that's what we mean when so in light, in terms of light colors, these are the primary colors, and when they're put together, they make this white light. And then with pigment, the basic colors are yellow, red, and blue, and when they're mixed together, they make a black. So the additive color system, which is like the light-based color system, is used in theater lighting. It's used in performance art lighting, light displays, and computer and video monitors. So if you look at your computer or your television, right, the kind of color system that they follow is the light, the additive color system. And then we have the subtractive color system, which is pigment. So you can see all these wonderful colors. Pigment is natural resources. It's from dirt. It's even from bugs. So we can get natural pigments from the earth. And that's how early artists started, right? Like you can imagine the cave paintings, right? And how folks started to paint early on with pigment from the earth. So then paint is pigment plus a binder. So a binder is something that kind of brings it, brings the substance together, right? And so you can also see it's really cool, like the relationship between chemistry and art, right? Because there's some chemistry involved in making paint. So here it's like you can see how to make ochre paint. So this color of paint comes from like these crumbled rocks, right? And then when you mix it with the binder, like that helps it kind of stay together, right? It binds it chemically. It's not like this dust, right? That's separate. The binder binds it together, and then it becomes paint. So then we have acrylic paint, which is, and then we have acrylic, and then we have oil. And we have watercolor, we have other types of paint also. Let me see if anyone has any questions at this point. Any questions or any comments? Okay, no questions yet. I'm going to keep going. Okay. So from here, we're going to look at the paint color system. Do you folks remember when maybe you did this activity once when you were in elementary school or maybe in high school, where you had to mix color together? So when we use the pigment color system, the basic colors, the primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. So in this system, like you can't mix other colors to make yellow or red or blue. So we start with these three. And I want you folks to kind of remember, if you did do this exercise, right, where you had to mix those three colors to make the secondary colors. So when you mix yellow and blue, you get green. When you mix red and yellow, you get orange. And then when you mix red and blue, you get violet. So this is a color wheel. We use this a lot in painting. And the color wheel kind of gives you his kind of like a map, right? So from here, you can say these are the primary, number 1. The secondary colors are the ones that say number 2. And then the tertiary colors are the ones that say number 3. And the tertiary colors basically are, if you look at orange and yellow, and if you mix orange and yellow together, then you'll make yellow orange. And then the same here. So that's how the color wheel works. On the right, we can see, so the ways that we use the color wheel too is that we can see, we can make sense of colors and how they work. So there's something called opposite colors. So for example, yellow and violet are opposite colors because they're opposite on the color wheel. Red and orange and blue-green are opposite because they're opposite on the color wheel. So when we see this example, this is an artist named Santa Barasa, and she's based a little bit north of the valley. I forget what that town is called. But she's an amazing artist. So you can see here that there's a kind of red background with this green foreground with this agave plant. Red and green are opposite colors. So you can see how this artist utilized opposite colors to create kind of this contrast. And if we zoom in closer to this piece, we see kind of silhouettes here. We see a man that looks like a Spanish kind of colonizer person. And then in the foreground, there's this woman and a child, an agave. And so you can see the contrast between the background and the foreground, right? And these are ways that she's using color to create that difference, that contrast. We can also see different ways that artists arrange color. So for example, this artist, Molly Costello, and she makes these kind of cutout paper arrangements. So you can see that she's using different shades and shades of blue here. And then she's adding all this color with the plants. So this also kind of is a guide to your eye, right? So you look at this piece and then you're directed towards all the kind of flowers on the left side. Then we have texture. So texture is something that we can almost feel with just using our eyes. So there's work that incorporates texture. This is a mosaic piece. And so with all the mosaic pieces together, we can see that there's some sort of texture here. If we were to touch it, there would be some, it wouldn't be soft soft or flat, right? There would be some texture to it. Then we have shape, volume, and space. So shapes just refer to different kind of two-dimensional shapes, right? We have a circle, we can have a triangle, we can have a rectangle, a square. Volume refers to, does it look like it has kind of space inside, which we look at when we create a sphere, a cylinder, right? We're creating space, and we're drawing more three-dimensionally, and that creates volume. Space is created with the placements of all these shapes, right? So if we have a perspective, if we draw kind of larger shapes on the foreground and then smaller shapes in the back, we start to create this depth, right? And starting to create perspective. And then these are part of your book, so you can see the different types of perspectives that exist, right? This type of perspective is like if you were looking at buildings from like a bird's eye view, right? And this type of perspective is if you're looking at things that are like, it has depth, right? So we can see that this piece on the right, the way the figures are arranged, the lines, the columns, the people on the front, the foreground, compared to the background, it creates this perspective here. The same with this painting here. It's distorted. But we can see that the columns on the top, and then it's kind of reciting columns here, creating this perspective. In artwork, we also have rhythm. And so this piece in particular from Cambodia, we can see that repetition of figures. The figures are placed similarly. On the bottom, we see this one large figure in the middle, and then smaller figures on the side. And they're positioned in the same way, and they're repeated. So this kind of creates in the eye, if you're observing it, if you're looking at it, it creates a sense of rhythm. Also on the top with these figures kind of placed, we start to see kind of these curves of the arms and start seeing the positioning of the legs. And because they're repeated, it also creates a sense of rhythm. And then with looking at works of art, so you don't only see artwork in museums, right? You see them in public as well. So space, in this sense, is it's a public art installation, and it's outside. And the emphasis is also space and context, right? So it's very important. A lot of times with public art, like where is it placed? Like the context matters. And the context gives it more meaning. So with this particular artist, he was making a political statement, right? And the placement of this plane, of this part of the plane, being existing in public space, and in that particular place also gives it the meaning it has, right? Awesome. So this also, you can see different types of art, right? So we see what people are wearing. These are handmade. They're masks. There's, what they're wearing. But then another layer of artwork is that the performance that is involved here, right? So they're not sculptures. They don't. Oftentimes we see these types of masks or garments, right, in museums. but they're not moving. But the real context here is that people make these things to reflect their cultures and their traditions and their rituals, and they also wear them and create this performance piece. So this is from a country in West Africa, and they are art objects. There's singing involved, there's dancing, there's celebrations that bring the community together, and there's a ritual involved. And this ritual in specific is to bring kind of spirits among the people, is to promote kind of a healthy community, is the energy and culture, and then to ensure that their crops grow. We also see time, right? This in particular is a piece that only lasted a certain amount of time. I don't remember how long. But the explosion, it's another political piece meant to give attention to war and violence and kind of explosions, right? But this piece is something that happens in a short amount of time, maybe 10 minutes, right? And then the important part is the documentation also of this piece, right? So it becomes kind of temporary, kind of ephemeral. So then moving on to architecture and the ways that we can look at architecture. So people, you can imagine from the 600,000 years of like since humans first developed, that humans, their basic needs, their basic necessities are food and shelter, right? And so you can also see that, the shelter is art in itself also. And so we're going to look at kind of the different ways that folks started to build and create for shelter. This is a really cool image. For example, we can see that people started to kind of carve out shelter from the landscape, right? So we can see these kind of houses incorporated into this mountain or hill. People also used rocks, right? We think of the pyramids from the Aztecs or the pyramids from the Mayas. And people gathered rock and kind of put them together. And then it's really interesting looking at pyramids. In the Mayan context, these pyramids were very ceremonial. The reason they're pyramids is that it's a structure that was supposed to take you closer to the gods, right? To the heavenly realm. And kind of giving you access on earth to the divine. And then other ways people, kind of other structural ways, if there's anyone that does construction or any of your tios or your tias are in construction, build houses, another system is using two posts and then a lintel that supports the posts, right, to start to create structures. And then in early kind of Greek and Roman, you probably have seen the column, right, which is based on that same concept of having two posts and then something supporting those posts to create a structure. And then you can see in Chinese architecture, kind of the innovations of Chinese architecture with these eaves and the brackets. So the way you can see all these posts here, but the way that they're creating support is through using these interlocking brackets, and also these eaves, which basically come out. They're like supports on the roof that come out longer than, they're like long, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, like long supports. So you can see the different shapes, right? This is like ancient Chinese building. And you can see that beautiful shape here, and kind of the different architecture in different parts. So these are the brackets, which were interlocking, right? Which will create more space, more strength. And then it also, because it created more strength closer to the roof, then that allowed for more space at the bottom. And then the eaves, which go beyond and also create that support. Architects also use the arch. So the arch is a very structurally strong kind of structural element. You can see the arch here. There's also the pointed arch, which a lot of Gothic architecture has. And then when there's repeated arches here, that's called an arcade. And then you can create even more kind of structure with also these kind of repeated arches in different directions, which creates different types of vaults. So these are vaults. Kind of vaulting, which is seen in churches. And then the arch, which you see here, and then you see this material kind of coming out here. That's called buttressing. And then you might have seen in some churches, there's some churches in Europe, like in Italy, where the inner supports of the arches are supported by these like outer buttresses, which create more structurally sound buildings, right? And then we have the dome, which was another innovation here. So this is a cathedral, right? So you can start to see the vaulting, all the different arches. So there's rows of arches here, the arcades, and then in different directions with the vaulting. And then up here, there's a dome. And there's a lot of Catholic churches like this. So next time, if you go to church or if you just look at a church, you can notice all these architectural elements. And architecture developed because, I mean, religion was very central, right, to the lives of people in the past, right? So these kind of holy places, were the catalyst for the development of all these architectural principles. So now we see more kind of contemporary kind of industrial revolution period where started using kind of steel frames. So the architecture was like stone and concrete. And then this is where steel started being used. And then in order to make like buildings taller, there was a use of in order to make things taller, then something was developed that's called reinforced concrete, which there's like a steel bar on the inside, and then there's like concrete on the outside. And that's what most of the structures are made of today. So this, for example, would be like reinforced concrete. So that allowed for taller buildings. Also, the development of the elevators, also of the elevator, allowed for taller buildings. And also the quality of reinforced concrete is that you can create shapes. So this opera house is from Australia. It's a very recognizable image. And you can see the kind of organic shapes that are created here. With reinforced concrete, it is possible to create kind of have more space to create different shapes. So we see this in different examples. This is the Guggenheim Museum in New York. You see how it's like a circular structure, also reinforced concrete. This is in France, kind of that curvature with the concrete, and then kind of the shape of the roof, reinforced concrete. And then we look at another kind of structural element of trusses, which are made out of triangles. So the triangle is a very strong shape to have structurally. And you can see that the trusses kind of resemble, right, those bridges, right, that you see, like the San Francisco Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. So building in the shape of a triangle makes the structure stronger. And then the geodesic dome, which is also made up of triangles. And this example of this architect who was very multidisciplinary. He worked in architecture, he worked in design, he did math, he was an engineer, he was into science. But all of his work was dedicated to making, what I really appreciate here from his quote is to kind of to make the world work for more humans, for 100% of humanity. So he designed this geodesic dome that is in Canada. Awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap up there. I'm gonna see if anyone has any questions, or any kind of responses, comments, thoughts, like anything. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Does anyone have any like thoughts, any comments, anything that stood out to you? Anything that was like new or interesting? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that structures can be circles, like the geodesic dome. Awesome, folks. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here if no one else has any questions. Also, feel free to email me. So remember to read your chapter and then take the quiz. Look out for your announcements, and I will see you folks next Monday. Awesome, folks. Hope you enjoyed it, and this was fun. Awesome. Have a good week, y'all.